In the tranquility of the night, some stories quietly come to life. Welcome to Hauntings and Horrors. Now, I will take you through chilling tales. I ran up to the stretched limousine parked on the side of the highway outside of the Vegas nightclub. I escaped from the jacket of my powder-colored suit had torn in the back and I could smell the sweat I'd built up. None of it was from dancing. The vehicle had a glossy, snowy tinge. The windows had a black enough tint to resemble squares of ink. I jogged around to the front and knocked on the driver's side window as pedestrians walked by and walked at me. The chauffeur rolled the glass down and faced me with a look of concern. His name was Martin. Although we met hours ago, I was afraid he'd either not recognize me or he'd be unwilling to transport me. My group had paid a hefty sum to use his service. I need you to take me back to Westgate Hotel. I said. He unlocked the car and I crawled into the back. The comfortable ivory-hued leather seats were plush. As I settled in a flat-screen soda box and match, Martin turned around to face me after he pressed the lock button on all the doors in the cop searching for you. The question was surreal but understandable. My knuckles felt as though they'd been broken and my right hand was starting to swell. I had a small hematoma on my forehead. He must have seen the rip on my suit jacket in his rear-view mirror. No, I said, though my answer was far from confident. I don't mind aiding and abetting charge if you did something you shouldn't have. Where's the rest of your bachelor party? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a stack of bills. I gave the newfound would-be legal advisor a few hundred. It's the city of sin, I said, and I know you've seen worse than me. I'm unaware of where my boys are. Give me your phone number, so if they call me, I can contact you though. Get them and bring them wherever they want to go. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you didn't treat me like I'm a criminal. Normal, well-adjusted people didn't get into bar fights. My devout Catholic family wouldn't like the circumstances I've placed myself in. It wasn't the first scuffle I'd been in still. It was a while since I engaged in such a nonsensical act of violence. I could remember defending myself against a few individuals during the chaos. There was one in particular I dealt with longer than the others in the middle of the incident. I couldn't bring back his face. I assumed it was the adrenaline or the lack of fluorescence within the establishment. The driver accepted my money and WOTE wrote his phone number down. On a blue napkin it had the letters TSC. These stood for his company. The sweetest champagne printed below the title in bold lettering with the words luxury common carrier. After he handed it to me, I patted myself down and realized I'd lost my phone. Martin pulled onto the main road and headed towards the hotel. I cracked the window to let some air in a cascade of neon. Flashing lights passed by outside. How does the other man look? Martin asked with a wry smile. My head hurt and all I wanted was for the evening to end. I didn't know where my group went, and that became a bigger concern than the events which transpired. A chair was flung in my direction by another patron at the bar, who felt as though I'd flirted with his fiancée. I said, "Did you?" I didn't answer. The scene came back to me after I stood. Shattered bottles and upside-down tables were everywhere. One of the bartenders pulled out a baseball bat, and before I knew it, we were fighting with staff. Not only the bouncers either. Even the janitor, who had to be at least 50 years old and 5'1", felt the need to join the melee. I took one guy to the ground, locked my arms around his neck and choked him unconscious. I let him stand again and he swung, so I gave him a left hook and dropped him. After that, an entire entourage came in through the front door, and the last thing I remember seeing was a knife. It was then I ran. I laid my head back into the seat of the limousine and fell into a slumber. The brightness of the mares as they faded behind us gave me speckles of light as I drifted off. When I awoke, I stared out of the window and I couldn't believe what I saw. Some castles lined the side of the highway. Behind them were mountains that appeared like giant clay prominences. Twisted trees dotted their sides. The sky had a purplish incandescent. I took in a lungful of air and tried to rationalize what I was seeing. There had to be a new Scottish-themed Chino. I was unaware of something bumped against my ankle and rested on my feet. I looked down and saw a rattlesnake with green scales. The hissing was louder than the radio, which BLU read in the background. Consistent circular patterns dotted its body. My years in the California desert gave me an understanding of which ones were venomous. This little guy resembled the type I'd seen growing up in the Mojave. They slithered near the late-night parties I attended on the outskirts of the air and spaceport. I jumped and yelled for help. As it wrapped itself around my leg, I searched around for whatever I could use as a weapon. All I could find was a bottle of champagne. It was one of many lined up in the lower compartment of the door. I was ready to smash it into the thing. I wouldn't do that. Martin said as he peered at me in the mirror. You going to bite? You'd also be cutting your shin wide open. Why'd you put this thing in here with me? You psycho. He cranked on the gear shift and placed the vehicle in park. I stared out at acres of woodland, which had nothing but black pines and miles of soil darker than charcoal. A fox scurried by one of his legs was missing. I looked to my right and saw a man in a pinstripe suit approaching the car. He was younger than me, had dark hair and wore a singular bright gold ring. He hopped in and thanked the driver. His voice was de-alid. He sat across from me and carried a scroll in his hand. He looked at me with wide eyes as the reptilian squeezed tighter. Who are you? It's not important, but your driver is John. When people die, as you did back in the bar by a knife wound, their transition to hell begins. Martin is a ferryman with tons of experience. Still, he's taken on the form of Martin, since it was the one you were familiar with. His words didn't sink in as my stomach twisted. Our hierarchy had made it so. Panic does not set in immediately. It causes more of a nervous breakdown when it's not expected. Still, as the person who does your processing, it's not in my best interest to lie to. You're going to a very grisly place. I also have the best offer to take away some of the pain. The vehicle moved again. We rolled up a steep incline along a mountainside, with various chads built out of volcanic rock. I tried to open the door in what would have been an idiotic attempt at getting away. If what this man said was true, I no longer had a biological system susceptible to agony. I figured the risk was worth it. The doors were still locked. You're kidding me here, I said as I folded my arms. That's ridiculous. He reached out to me. He placed his fingertips on my side. I looked down and saw a part of his hand disappear into where my wound was the same place. A blade had made entry earlier. The entire front of my shirt blossomed with blood. My disorientation must have made me not notice it. I thought I looked out and saw a group of people in the Pine Barrens. They went together as one massive pit, and my mind couldn't accept what my eyes were witnessing. They were all covered in glacial sleep. They snapped off each other's frost-burnt ligaments. I know your sins, he said as he rolled his shoulders back from the time he pushed a boy off the monkey bars in third grade to embezzling money. The insurance company trusted you to be a good employee. I can go on, but my knowledge of your occasional moral bankruptcy makes little to no difference. I have a proposal, one you would be wise to accept. I would like to recruit you to be one of our servants. What would I be doing? I asked as a lump formed in the back of my throat. The first millennia, you would torture souls. You'd use a variety of white phosphorus weaponry to torment whoever we tell you to. After that, your contract would expire, and, depending on how well you've done, we'll move you where we need you. No, I said, I can't bring that much pain on anyone. I like to fight every once and again to remind myself I'm well alive. Yet that doesn't mean I want to injure or maim or torment other people who haven't done anything to me. I choked the words out, and the horrifying reality of how things had changed overcame me. I had the sensation of watching my entire moral constitution erupt in flames. "Fine," he said as he undid the scroll. "Then you're going to be on the other side of it. Here are some of the servants you're going to meet." He showed me various etchings of human and monster hybrids. Each portrait had a darkish gray sediment used to illustrate them. Each one had its title and name floating below them in calligraphy. The job descriptions they carried were the types of punishment they dealt out. I knew, based on his verbiage, that I was to be one of their subjects. The first one he showed me was the Milvus. He was a towering figure with scorpion stingers replacing his hands. His forehead had a bulbous rhinoceros horn that protruded from it. His exposed legs had SS all over them. The second was Cressy. Her hair looked like mold, and it grew from her flesh like a scabrous in the infected layer. She held a fist full of ebony needles and had a grotesque hunch. The third was the Basset. His torso had hundreds of thousands of goat heads. Around his neck dangled a necklace of severed limbs. The fourth was the Herald. He had a blindfold on a tar-like liquid drenched in. An emanation of steam came off from his skin. The fifth was the Storm Lion. The animalistic form had half of its head missing parts of his brain that are splattered along his front. His muscles had similar striations as those of a bodybuilder. His malformed paws had shattered bones that pierced through his skin. Yet he had something which stemmed from his mouth and had torn apart man. What stuck out between his teeth was a rake with ends that looked sharper than razors. The sixth and final was Elol. The thing wore a cloak. Copper had slithered out from its esophagus. Her very skin had bubbles and blisters, which indicated perpetual and intense heat. "You can avoid spending time with these demons if you sign here," he said, as he pointed to a line at the bottom. The snake's head angled upwards to look at me. Its tongue flicked with a frantic repetition, a signal for how hungry it was to put its toxin in me. While I knew it couldn't kill whatever form I now inhabited, I didn't yearn for the wretchedness I would feel from it. "I'll do it," I said. He smiled and handed me a pen. The writing tool had vulture feathers. At the end, with a tip chiseled from a hyena claw, he held up a future jar of solvent for me to dip the instrument into. I made a motion to stab him under the jaw with it. I telegraphed the motion. He shoved me back with more force than a semi-truck. My ribs broke. My chest cavity had crushed. I still had a hold of the pen, and I used it to smash the window. The snake bit down. I grabbed it to place it as far away from my body as I could muster. I slammed it against the upholstery until I turned it into a liquidized dupe. He screamed and wrapped his hands around my throat. I managed to make it to the front seat. I couldn't get him off of me and felt consciousness start to lift away. I cracked Martin in the back of the head with my free hand as he screamed at me. The limousine went past the rusted metal guard rail and slid downhill. Craggy formations of incitant obsidian rushed by in a blur. We crashed into a boulder. The airbags went top and Martin's head whipped against the wheel before he went limp. The man let go of me and was flung forward through the windshield and against the megalithic stone. I crawled out of the limousine. I heard a river nearby and a smell that had a combination of acrid pollution, ashen seed or ember cyanide. A screech bombarded where I lay and burst my eardrums. I stared up at the darkening horizon and saw the man in the pinstripe suit. He walked up to me with the scroll and kicked me in the head. I spat my teeth out and tasted dirt mixed in with the salt from my blood. "Leave me alone," I groaned. "Sign the paper or you'll spend eternity wishing for it all to end." I looked up and saw something blackening the sun. It was a moth with wings of silver the size of a city block. The main bill in its form had body parts sewn together with a needle and thread. "It's going to come closer to feast on you unless you sign it," he said. I submitted. I gave my signature. My eyes opened. All I saw was an equilateral shape of light above me. I stared around the sterile white room. There was someone else in the bed next to mine. A flimsy curtain separating us gave an unconvincing sense of privacy. I was in a medical facility. IVs lined my arms. Heart monitoring pads were all along my chest. I reached up and pressed the help button on the remote control. A nurse skimming the oxygen left my lungs as I laid eyes on the health seeker assistant. He was identical to the man in the pinstripe suit I dealt with. Where am I? You're in Sultan Hospital Medical Center. What happened? You were in a fight at a nightclub. Someone stand. You suffered penetrating abdominal trauma. It didn't hurt any vital organs, although it was deep enough to come close. You lost a lot of blood. You required surgery. Who brought me here? A friendly limousine driver. How long have I been? You were Coma West for 2 hours. You stepped out of our front entrance and hit the ground. I'm unsure if it was the concussion or the hemorrhage that caused the coma. I can notify the doctor to come and speak with you if you want exact details. I declined. It was 5 days until my mobility came back and another week before they finally discharged me. I went back to my white-collar desk job. Under the guise of how nothing changed, I pushed down the whole experience. I didn't want to give credence to the situation as being anything other than a dream, one wrought by alcohol, adrenaline, injury, and anesthetic. Years later, I went to confession I hadn't been in the chair since I was a teenager. I knew I should seek out therapy, but I reasoned this was a good start. I told the priest everything about the limousine ride and the events in Vegas leading up to it. A voice beckons to me. The man of the cloth said it's telling you to pick up hunting. It wants you to practice for what awaits you soon. The stories have been told, but their shadows will continue to haunt our minds. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Hauntings and Horrors. Turn on notifications so you won't miss any thrilling horror stories. Good night and sweet dreams.